Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today about a very important discussion about creating equality and inclusion in the boathouse. My name is Heather Alschuler. I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives from the George Pocock Rowing Foundation. We have been really honored to be able to lead some fantastic discussions throughout the COVID pandemic. We're involving a lot of different topics that sort of have come up within this unique time. And today is no different. We actually had equality and inclusion to be the theme for a few weeks now. However, due to this last week being filled with many big emotions, and added sort of rawness on top of the ongoing pandemic, we really appreciate your time and attention to this very important topic. We at the GPRF have been focusing our work on forever changing the way kids find, start, and stay rowing for over a decade. And in the same vein, we have also been trying to challenge and improve the system and culture of this incredible sport, to be sure that when kids find it, start it, they also want to stay in it so they can experience its life beneficial lessons. However, no one wants to stay anywhere where they do not feel welcomed or valued as part of the group. Nor can all people flourish in a standard uniform program model. I would also like to say that the GPRF is far from perfect, nor have we found all the answers to opening up our sport to be truly inclusive to all. But we continue to learn and listen, and we are trying, and we are looking forward to coming together with all of you to continue the discussion surrounding inclusion and equality in the boathouse and equity in the boathouse. This is a topic that can be very broad. And in the current climate, race is certainly at sort of the forefront of this focus. However, I would also like to open your mind to inclusion to also be broader than that. Socioeconomic factors can play into that, race, physical, and mental ability. A lot of different areas can be included when you are discussing inclusion. We need to take a step back and start to think about who can go through the boathouse door and feel as though the sport and the culture that awaits them makes them feel welcomed and have the opportunities to fully flourish. So today, we are very fortunate to be joined by the incredible Dr. Sara Lopez from the University of Washington, where she is the co-director for the Center for Leadership in Athletics and Program Director for the Intercollegiate Athletic Leadership Department. And she is also an incredible rowing coach on top of that. So she knows our sport just a little and has quite the rowing resume herself in various involvements. We also have the GPRF's Community Partnerships and Scholarship Manager, Delaney Peltz, here to share some valuable resources and educators that boathouses can use to further their journey in this topic. So to get started, I'm going to invite Dr. Sara Lopez to join us right away. So Sarah, turn the stage over to you.
Thank you. I just realized when I was looking at the chat and seeing all the names and programs, how much I missed regattas, just being able to see people. So it's fun to just kind of like scrolling through to try to catch everybody's face. So again, we have a few minutes, and what Heather said is so key. A lot of us have been having this topic on our minds and trying to do things over the years. And, we've made some progress, but we've still got a lot to do. And so today I'm going to give you a few things just to think about, and we're going to kind of keep popping out, and I'm going to ask you to discuss them with a small group. I will tell you up front, you're not going to have enough time to get into a big discussion. So I'm going to try to give you a really specific question. And whoever in the group feels they want to jump on it, grab a watch. If you got your stroke watch, that's even better. And you're going to try to give everybody about a minute to give their response. And then very gently, you're going to say, okay, moving on to, and then go to the next person. All right. So in other words, I want you to start thinking. I want you to start sharing with each other, but we're only going to be on here for a short while. So we have to make the most of our time. I was going to do this without a sort of a PowerPoint. And then the more I tried, the more I realized I did want to show you some things. So I'm going to see if I can bring it up. And you can tell me if you can see this. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, great. All right. So again, the title obviously is looking at the restart during COVID, but it's any other time, right? I mean, that's the thing. A lot of us have been at this work quite a long time. And, you know, I was thinking about I've seen a few shirts even that say 2020 year of, and then there's a number of phrases you might have seen on them. Most of them aren't very positive. Most of us agree this is probably not one of the banner years in terms of being excited about what it's brought us so far. But I saw this graphic and I decided to use it today because I think it represents where we are. COVID, and I will also say the intensity and the fervor for which the protests have taken sort of shape in so many cities are acting as a huge disruptor. And disruption can be annoying, it can be challenging, but it also gives us an opportunity because suddenly all the things that we thought were sacred or were ingrained, we kind of realize maybe they're not. And some of you have dealt with that in your personal lives. Some of you have dealt with that in your professional lives. And so when I looked at this graphic, I realized, yeah, there's this huge disruption in our boathouses, in our sport, again, in our lives. And if we can sort of grab on and decide how to use that as a way to make a pivot, as a way to create a change, create a shift, at least get people to think anew about some of these topics, we may actually be able to make further progress. And sometimes that's what these disruptions do. They startle us out of our habits, out of our norm. And you got to say, we are all being startled out of our habits, our norm, what we are used to. So I want you to kind of go into this conversation with that in mind. As Heather said, when I think about an inclusive and equitable boat, how important that we think beyond the typical, you know, and especially in rowing, I think we often, do we have people of color in the boats, right? That's kind of what we look for. But there are so many pieces of our identity that give those differences, give us those different groups. Now, the thing that we have to realize is that some of these are groupings, identities that tend to keep us out of feeling welcome at a boathouse. Also, some of the elements of our identity are visible and some are invisible. And so as we think about inclusion and equity in our boathouse, I really encourage you to think across a lot of different categories. Again, I'll sort of keep using identities because there are a number that will come up in your community, and because of the geographic differences, the different places we live, we're going to see sort of the need to think about that if we truly want to reflect the communities in which our boathouses exist. So it's kind of like open up your mind a little bit and try not to get stuck. And so what I'd say the usual one is, especially for rowing, which is important, but not the only identity element, and that's usually race and ethnicity. All right, so I'm going to give you a little preparation here. Get ready for your first sort of breakout group. Here's what I want you to think about on a more personal note. You can look at that wheel and think about your identity. And again, most of us have different elements, right? What is one element of your identity that fits with the stereotype rower identity? Okay. What's an element of your identity, your personal identity, that fits with the stereotype rower identity? And if you can, just jot it down because it'll make it easier when you go into your group. Now I want you to think about what one element doesn't fit in with that stereotype. Okay. So when I think about this, I think one element of my identity that fits in was this idea of a collegiate sort of entry into the sport. Okay, so that fits in for me. I also, though, came from a middle-class background and knew nothing about rowing. So there was part of this kind of just fake it till I make it, because I had no idea what the sport was about. So you can see that sort of works a little bit of both ways. Now, one identity of my, or one element of my identity that doesn't fit in with the sport was the fact that I was gay. And I actually sat as a young coach in a meeting at a US rowing convention. And they were voting on putting in a non-discrimination clause into the US rowing sort of governance documents. And a very prominent coach stood up and said, we don't need those kind of people in our boathouses, specifically talking about the idea of sexual identity. Now, as a young coach sitting there, nobody knew in the room, or very few people knew in the room, who I was or how I identified. So in a sense, I had the privilege of having it be an invisible part of my identity. But think about it inside. Think about the impact on a young coach who's so excited to be in this room with these names, these figures who are the powerhouses in our sport, and to have one of them stand up and tell me that I wasn't needed in our sport. That's the piece that we have to grapple with. Is what do we say sometimes, deliberately in this case? What do we say sometimes innocently, without malice, without really being aware of what we're saying? Maybe it's out of ignorance. And what do we say subtly that sends that message that sometimes we don't even know was received? And that's what makes this such complicated work, because there are parts of our identity that are invisible, parts that are visible, and there's so many messages. So I want you to think, and you probably will only have time to share one of these. So what about your identity fits with rowing, and what does that bring you? What feelings does that bring you? If you feel comfortable, share an element that doesn't fit. And what does that bring? Are you able to hide it? And if you're not, what's the implications? Again, I know it's going to be tough. Heather's going to drop you into a group. You're going to have 4 minutes, and there should be about 4 people, so that's about 1 minute each. You can just share one piece of this, but let me also ask you to do this. If you're in a group with somebody and you really feel like you want to keep this conversation going, jot their name down and talk to them later. Connect with them later, okay? Because these are important conversations. All right, Heather, if you would.
All right, yeah, I will send you to your groups. Please opt in, and we will call you back and give you a 60-second countdown. Welcome back, everyone. Everyone will be back within the next 20 seconds. Welcome back. As everyone finds their way back to the main room.
All right. Well, I hope you had a good conversation. Again, I'm sure it was not quite as satisfying just in time, but hopefully it just started you thinking. You might have noticed too that when you thought about the things that connect you with rowing, those tend to bring up confidence. They tend to make us feel good. They make us feel included. It's an easy way to feel included when we have those connections. Sometimes the elements that don't fit the stereotype are things that even if we're not pushed away, they can still make us uncomfortable. They can make us not feel as confident. They can make us worry. And if there's too much of that, we tend to drift away. We tend to back off. Why would you want to go someplace where you don't feel like you're a part of things? So I'm going to bring back up the next slide. And what I want you to think about here is this idea that in our boathouses, they develop an identity. Now, I don't want you to name names so nobody gets into trouble, but you can think about the boathouses that your team tends to compete against. And think about the sort of personality or the image of those other boathouses, right? Some boathouses might be seen, in a negative or a positive light. Those personalities, if we want to call them that, are often created by the way that we develop the culture within our boathouse. And in rowing, especially, we talk about tradition. We talk about things that are historic. Well, we've done it that way. And there's also things that are habits. What we forget is that sometimes those very traditions, the things that have developed over time as part of our history, and even the things within our boathouse that have become habits can actually be the very elements that, again, push somebody away or make them feel unwelcome. So the key is that just as we have to understand who we are and understand those elements of our identity, we need to spend some time understanding who our boathouse is and calling into question the things that sometimes we hold on as tradition if it's not serving us well. Letting go of things that are part of our history if it's not allowing us to be open to new people to join our organization. Understanding that what's become an easy habit might be something that's closing the door for somebody else to participate. So in the work that I do at the University of Washington, we talk a lot about sport being this place, and this is phrased in terms of young people, as a space and a context which gives young people a sense of being valued, which allows them to explore who they are and who they want to become. And sometimes that's within a lot of these different identities that I showed you in that wheel. And in order to do that, in order to create that space that allows those things to happen, sometimes we have to disrupt those norms in our sports settings. And again, as I said at the start, we're in this position of everything being disrupted. So let's take advantage of it, would be one way to think about it. Actually, I saw that Helen Tillman was on the call, and she has actually been a part of the development of some core practices that we identified. And I want to just point out a couple of them to you today, because I think that if we keep them in mind, they sometimes give voice to why so many of us are in this work. And we talk about this idea of effective coaching, being able to have high athletic performance and to allow the social emotional growth and well-being of our participants. And even though we phrase this about youth participants, I would actually make the argument, especially as a master's coach, that it's the social and emotional growth and well-being of all rowers, whatever their ages are. So the two practices that I want to point out to you are building social emotional skills. Part of that is letting people learn who they are and being comfortable with that and being valued for it. And a second is to allow our athletes, allow our participants to develop connections. Those two practices together are incredibly powerful and can be transformative, especially in developing young people. And I think they give us a real goal for why this is such important work.
Sarah,
So
do you have
here's,
slides
yep.
that you, the slides are not showing. I don't know if you think
Oh,
the
they're not.
slides are up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes it a little harder. Yeah. Let me see if I can, I wonder if I have to start and share again. Thanks for letting me know. Let's see if this works. And I can make the slides available later. Do you see them now?
Yes,
You do.
that's
Okay.
great.
All right. So I'm just going to go to right where I was so we don't lose any more time. So this shows the core practices that I mentioned, and again, the two that I'm referring to in particular, building social emotional skills and developing connections. So I'm going to turn back to you now. Here's what I want you to think about. What does a more inclusive, equitable boathouse provide for your club? And I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. Because it's not easy work. It's challenging work. It's work that doesn't happen by just simply putting up a new hashtag on our social media, or even by putting up an incredibly powerful statement on our website. It happens by the programs that we implement, by the actions that we take, by the policies that we put into place, by the way we train our coaches so that they are able to have that relationship with the athletes who come to our boathouse door. So why do it? I know some boathouses that do it because they figured out they can probably get more grants if they're talking about reaching out to kids that typically don't have a lot of opportunity. That may be true, but I'm hoping that isn't the only reason a boathouse would choose. So why should this be a part of your boathouse? Think about that for just a moment. Heather's going to drop you into a group. Again, you'll have about 1 minute. Try to see if you can articulate, what does it bring your boathouse? The more that you have a sense of that, the more you're going to be willing to do the hard work to truly make it happen. Thanks, Heather.
All right, here you guys go again. Welcome back. As we just wait for everyone to return to the main meeting area, we will get started again shortly. So just hang tight and welcome back. I should say, if any questions come up during this, please don't hesitate typing them in the chat function. I will be monitoring that, and we'll also have a time for question and answer at the end.
All right, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you heard some good things. The group I was in, it's interesting, we talked a little bit about the idea, and I want to say, when I mention the grants, I'm not saying that that's not a good thing, but it's kind of like saying the reason I work is because I get a paycheck. Yes, it's true, but I could do a lot of things to get a paycheck, and hopefully it's not the only reason I work. I work and I get more satisfaction because I love it, right? It's what I'm passionate about. And I think this is similar. So um, the idea that both what it can give, one of the people in our group was talking about, to the community. And the other person in the group I was in was talking about the Boathouse, bringing their awareness up, helping them be better members of their community and maybe growing in some ways. So again, there can be multiple pieces, but we need to understand those because it makes us more committed to doing the work. All right, I'm going to see if I can succeed now. Bring my PowerPoint back up. So I wanted to just point, and I know Delaney is going to have some more resources for you, but what I want to suggest is this idea that we need to be very deliberate in the culture that we're creating in our boathouse. And there's a lot of talk about this idea of, putting out the welcome mat. But those welcome mats can actually give a lot of different messages. And a welcome mat alone, what do the other parts of your boathouse say beyond the welcome mat? When somebody goes to your website, when somebody shows up at the boathouse, when somebody interacts with your coaches, when somebody tries to register and this is their first time, when the only way they can access your boathouse might be through the internet and they don't have a computer. So all of these different pieces, again, can create either true welcome mats or they can create barriers. And so part of the work is for us to closely examine what's happening at our boathouse and what are those messages, again, intentional or unintentional, that can make people feel excluded, uncomfortable, or even threatened. So my first bit of advice is that you learn more about your broader community. A lot of us talk about wanting a boathouse that reflects the community in which the boathouse operates. What does that mean? Who's in your community? And part of that is developing relationships before we ask somebody to come over to our house. Part of that's knowing the groups, knowing the people, and asking them if they want to be part of our community and helping them learn what that means. And listening carefully to what they need. So again, we might think we have the best sport in the whole world. We might think that rowing offers amazing experiences. And I tend to agree with you. But we need to do that in an inviting way and understand that it takes people maybe a while to learn what that is. And they may turn us down. What we don't want is that they turn us down because they have misconceptions or because they feel like we're being condescending or they feel like we're trying to fix them. So how do we engage in a relationship that is genuine and that truly is inviting? Another piece of work on this is for you to closely examine your boathouse and your boathouse practices, to understand your assumptions and biases. And it's so hard to do this when it's our own because we just don't see it as clearly. Again, what are the messages? What are we asking people to do just to get in the door that might right away be putting up barriers? What are the messages? What are the visuals? What are the written messages? And what are the policies? And a third area is that we train and grow, that we really pay attention to how our coaches and our staff understand how to create a healthy, positive environment for all of our participants, not just the ones who have great ERG scores, not just the ones who have the potential to, be in the first boat. And if we mean that, we have to think about, again, what does that mean in terms of participation? What does it mean in terms of who gets to go to regattas? And we also have to establish behavioral expectations for volunteers and parents. We need to teach people how to contribute to this culture that's going to be inviting. Otherwise, that parent standing on the shore who has an interaction and is just like, whoa, I'm out of here, and my kid's out of here. So we need to build the entire community within our boathouse to understand why this is important, how we do it, and to really make sure that we're doing that with intentionality. And my final tip is that we be humble and that we be generous. We're going to make mistakes. For some people, we're not going to move fast enough. For others, it's going to be way too fast, and we're going to lose all the wonderful tradition that was a part of our boathouse. And the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. We need to move, but we need to be careful so that we bring everybody along. And when I say be generous, it's to understand that, again, we'll make mistakes and other people will make mistakes. And that's okay. Own them, figure out how to move forward, and keep making progress. We need to do that in so many areas of our lives, right? You can practice at the boathouse. So to bring this home, here's what I want you to think about. A lot of us are comfortable with some areas of identity more than others. So being a gay woman, that's an area that's pretty comfortable for me. But I will admit, and I attribute this to my age and my experience, I'm less comfortable with people who are transgender, probably because I don't know them as well, probably because I haven't had as much experience. When I think about people with different class, socioeconomic status, I feel like, again, I understand the class that I exist in, but when it comes to somebody who might come from what we would traditionally call a lower class or lower socioeconomic status, I don't understand all the challenges. And so this little spectrum gives you a way to think about, where am I comfortable and what role am I comfortable adopting? So if I, again, use my experience, we tend to start at that, hopefully not the ignore and avoid, but maybe the neutral. So when I think about a transgender athlete, it's a little tougher. I don't know exactly what to do. I don't understand all the challenges. So I might be able to be, hopefully not just neutral, but hopefully an ally, but I have learning to do. I have growing to do. I need to understand more. When it comes to maybe helping somebody else who is a gay athlete, hopefully I can be a champion. I understand that one more. I've obviously experienced it more. It doesn't mean that you have to be that particular identity, but again, it's just this idea of, where are you comfortable? What do you tend to see? And to try to educate yourself about the areas that you're not as comfortable with. Again, because of your experience, or just because maybe it's the way that your culture, shaped you. So if we can figure out where we are, we can suddenly become much more responsive to working with the different people who may show up to our boathouse. And hopefully we become champions for more and more people who don't necessarily look exactly like us, who don't come from the same background we do, who don't have the same identity we do. And now we're starting to make some progress. Now we're starting to really do things in our boathouse that'll make a difference. So I'm going to give you one more breakout, and here's the question for you. Who can you engage from within your boathouse? And I want you to take that word engage very broadly. Who needs to be part of the conversation if you're truly going to make a difference in changing the culture in your boathouse to bring in more people, to make it a more inclusive and equitable place? Maybe it's your coaches. Maybe it's somebody who has a tie with a community or a group that you hope to bring into your boathouse more fully. Maybe it's somebody who just gets this and is a natural at kind of this type of work. And then who from outside, maybe it's an individual, maybe it's a group, can you invite to engage with you, to partner with you? Who can you invite into the conversation? Again, putting up the welcome sign is not enough. We need to create the relationship. How do you start that? I want you to pick one of those, okay? Just again, in the interest of time, you probably won't have time to get both. So who would be really important for you to tomorrow pull together and start talking about within your boathouse? And once we can start to reach out a little bit more, who could you pull in from outside the boathouse that may have a connection with a group that's could be a natural partner for your boathouse to truly make a difference, to talk about what strategies might work? Okay, there's your challenge. Heather's going to give you a group, and then we'll wrap this up.
Away you go. Welcome back, everybody. Everyone is just returning to the main room. They will automatically be back within 30 seconds if they don't opt in.
Okay. So Heather, I can send you the slide deck. I didn't realize that when we came back, I had to re-share. That was weird.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either.
I'm just going along.
I was like, is she showing slides? Does she think she is? I don't know.
She thinks she is.
Welcome back, everyone. A couple more seconds. Everyone should be back. And welcome back, everybody. I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah.
All right, well, we're gonna wrap it up. I hope you had some fun conversation. Again, hopefully the start of a conversation. As I mentioned, if you can, follow up with somebody, or just again, use this group to have some additional resources. I know Delaney's gonna give you some more. One word of caution, in our enthusiasm, again, we need to really be sure that we're building an authentic relationship, both inside the boathouse and outside. Our enthusiasm sometimes, we can end up a little bit like a steamroller, right? We're excited, we want people to move along, and we just need to be careful and cautious. That relationship is going to take a little bit of time. Don't be surprised if there's a little bit of skepticism at first, a little bit of, like, what are you trying to get, right? What are you trying to do? So we need to, again, be authentic, be open, and work the relationship, build the relationship, the partnership. And so this is a long-term project. If we want to change our sport, the really good news, as I said at the very beginning, we got a big kick in the butt. We've had absolute disruption of everything that we thought was sacred to this sport. It's okay. But how do we want to come out of it? Let's use this time to do some things different. We don't have to go back to exactly what we had. And that, not going back to exactly what we had, gives us the opportunity to do some things in a different way. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and it may be a little rough, and we're going to make some mistakes. But think about the possibilities. Think about where that could put us. That's the exciting part of this. So thank you for being here, and thanks for listening to me and letting me share some ideas with you. And I wish you the very best as we get back out on the water and as we bring more people to the sport. that we all love and know is a powerful experience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lopez. We really appreciate your expertise and just attention to all of this and starting the conversation for some and adding to it. So in that same vein, we're going to hear from Delaney in a moment, some additional resources she has, as well as I will send out Sarah's slides so you can all look at those in a follow-up email after this, this call. But to continue to keep these conversations going, I'm going to invite GPRF's Community Partnerships and Scholarship Manager, Delaney, to share with some of the resources and information that is out there to keep this conversation going and keep growing our own knowledge about all of the topics with inclusion and equity. So Delaney.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Officially, it's afternoon. Just to stay respectful of everyone's time, I will very briefly, Heather, I think if I can try and share my screen. I should be able to. I will very briefly show you some resources that we're also going to send you. These are by no means the end-all be-all of everything. We put them together for our partner boathouses, and we've decided there's no point in keeping them to ourselves and to our network, especially now. Let's see. I want to share my desktop. Yes, I do. Thank you. Okay. So some of this covers what Sarah was speaking about, and these resources are going to give you just some little starting points, especially if you're starting these conversations within your boathouse and haven't had them before. It'll include ideas, it includes tips and some other options for just how to work through these topics. We also have something that I think everyone should definitely keep an eye out for is the difference between what outreach and community engagement is. You'll get this, so I would love it if you would read through it, but in brief, outreach, you are reaching out to someone, and engagement, they are actually invested and engaged in what you are asking and hoping they'll be sharing with you. And that's just a very important thing to bear in mind as you start trying to bring communities into your boathouses. And then I have also included some books and other resources, websites and organizations. And because it came up in my little discussion room, this is one, they're Northwest local organization, but you can look for organizations that can assist you in this area because we're not experts. I by no means am an expert. I am a white passing woman. I should not be centered in this conversation at all. These are merely places that I would love people to start, and I think they're very useful. Some educators, I do want to make the point that if you are really interested in just diving full force head first into this, there are some educators out there who are incredibly, they've been doing this work far longer than I've been alive, honestly. One of these, who is probably very well known, is Rachele Cargill. She provides a lot of resources both for free and for sale on her Patreon. And she's just a really incredible person to be following. I definitely would caution you on reaching out to any educators right now. They're pretty overloaded with everything that's going on, and remaining respectful of their time and personal resources and emotions is really, really important, especially right now. Another place that you can go, this is more of an online community, is called Check Your Privilege. And then Layla Afsad has a podcast and also a really introspective book that will walk you through it. It has a catchy title, Me and White Supremacy, but it is a very careful, guided journaling experience to work through a lot of what Sarah was introducing. So that's all from me. And I'm also a resource. I'm happy to be a sounding board, to ping pong ideas. I'm here, I'm around. I like rowing. That's all.
Thank you so much, Delaney. So we will include those resources that Delaney put together and include that in the follow-up email from today's discussion. So there's certainly a lot to look at and read, and to continue this discussion, I think, is really important. So, you know, thank you so much for everyone to being here. I feel like we're crunched for time right at the end, but, you know, just it is really important conversation to continue and continue to expand on. Make sure you check for that email going out, and do read those resources that we'll send along, and we can continue to keep this conversation going. That, you know, I think is really an important part of this. One more just plug in this same realm. I would like to invite anyone who is interested in including para rowing. There is a global meetup tomorrow at 9 a.m. hosted by Seize the Oar. More information is found on their website, seizetheoar.com. Thank you so much again for joining us, and look for that email for those resources, and do reach out if you need anything. So thank you very much, Sarah and Delaney, and for everyone else for joining us today. Thank you.